I love mine.
It's very quiet. It's extremely quiet.
You have an Android too.
You agree with me. People are very head down. Oh,
Right. Please don't do that in the middle of it. You're making me laugh. What? That's fine. Well, it sounds like you're on a chance to sleep.
Alright, you're live and right now.
Right now. Alright, I'm go ahead and start. This is my very first time doing this. I'm kind of excited to see everyone, the ones that did show up. This is awesome. Again, my name is Rafael. I am the creative director and co-owner here at Ctrl Shift VFX. We do a lot of work for some biggest clients here in Houston, as well as outside of Houston. And basically, I just want to basically tell you a little about what we do, and as well as this is a little teaser of our reel that we're going to be releasing next year at the beginning of it. That's it. So, so it's a little teaser we're going to be showing for for next year, and basically a lot of the stuff we use was inside of Cinema 4D using RedShift, as well as with 3ds Max with RedShift, and a lot of After Effects compositing as well. And just a little bit about me. I have been in the industry for about 12 years now, and I've worked for I was a motion director for a while, the largest Houston agency, one of the largest Houston agencies here in Houston. Worked my way up from a motion designer all the way to the motion director there for about 3 years. And then I led, and here currently, I lead a team of creatives. So I love supporting them in their goals and what they want to do within their career. Just a little bit about my background. I actually won a couple awards, silver awards and gold awards in the Addies here in Houston back in about, I think, 2011 and 13 from some of the works that I have done. I've always been an explorer of new ways to improve motion graphics and 3D, and as well as the integration of the two, with either being with live action video or just improving 3D altogether. Always trying to find new ways and how to implement them within different programs. I've been told that I'm a unicorn. I didn't really find out what that really meant until a couple of days ago. But basically, what it meant is that even though I have plateaued, I always try to find new ways to find a new goal in mind to achieve to, and just keep learning and moving on. So today our agenda, we're going to first go over V-Ray versus RedShift. I've used both programs, V-Ray mostly the majority of my career. I've always been an advocate for V-Ray, but after learning about RedShift about a couple months ago, I know it's been out for a while, but RedShift really caught my eye just because of how fast it is compared to V-Ray with a lot of the types of rendering that you can do with it. And after using it for a couple months, I was like, okay, this is something that I should not just pass it by. And I really wanted to show what I have learned from it, and then the pros and cons between the two. Then I'm a little bit between show you about texturing, as well as lighting within RedShift, and go over some of the render settings in there that I like to use and implement into a lot of things that I do inside of there. And then a quick way on how to actually export that into After Effects, and the type of files I use and how to get that in there. So V-Ray and RedShift, There's basically the pros of V-Ray and the pros of RedShift. So V-Ray, it is cheaper for shorter projects because you actually can just rent it for about $80 a month. It's a little more expensive if you want to purchase a lifetime license. It's about $1,000-ish. But the pro of having that, you have the availability for multiple programs. It has a lot more you can actually use for different types of programs out there, and as well as there's a bigger access to libraries that you actually can pull from to help you learn tutorial-wise, or as well as pulling from into the libraries. And there's a lot of resources out there for it. And it's really fast at doing CPU type rendering. Even though it does have GPU in it, it's still not on par to what I've noticed in RedShifts. Because V-Ray does both CPU and GPU, I believe that because it does both, it can't quite handle the GPU specific part of rendering as it could if it was just solely for that. Great thing about RedShift is very cheap compared to a lot of the renderers that are out there. For a lifetime license, any updates for any program, $500. That's all you have to use. You buy it and that's it, you have it. That's what's really great about it. And once you buy it, it's accessible to all programs that it's only used for currently. I believe it's for cinema, it has Katana, Maya, as well as Houdini, and 3ds Max. Those are the ones that it uses currently right now. I've noticed it's easier to texture in it as well. You're able to actually create better textures quicker, and it's then easy to actually compare that to your render settings, applying those two together. And I noticed, and this is really what got me excited about it, that it's really good with glasses and clear plastics and any type of translucencies. I've always had an issue with V-Ray trying to render a type of clear plastic. You set it up, hit it to render, and it takes forever. It's like a simple a glass on a table will take like 20 minutes. Well, I feel like that was unnecessary. And doing that with RedShift can take about a minute or less depending on your machine's power. So if you have any questions or want to connect anytime, here's my email, my LinkedIn, and you can tweet me at MotionWrap. So I'll leave it up here for if you want to write it down.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into it. So I put together a quick scene that I did not too long ago here in Max of an environment. Let's get it set to load up. Of course it would do that. I've been running in the background, so we probably ran out of memory. Let me close that out real quick and open it back up. I told you, Ryan, this was gonna happen. Yeah, these past couple of months has been really fun to learn how to do a new render engine. I've also noticed that transferring from V-Ray to this has been really easy. Because if you knew V-Ray from the beginning, and even just standard texturing and lighting, being able to apply what you've learned in those to RedShift has been pretty simple. Especially how the ease of use of RedShift is. Basically, the button says what it does. So I did a quick render earlier too, just to show you a little bit of the scene that I was doing. Go ahead and open that in Photoshop.
Technology, right?
I know, right?
It's better, but
Yeah. not just set that it crashed. So this is a quick interior render. This is a straight render. I have not comped it or anything like that. Using just basically RedShift and some basic settings and parameters to make this render. This is a 1080 render. It rendered in about 15-ish minutes or less. Normally if I had rendered something like this in V-Ray, it would have taken about 35 to maybe 40 minutes for a frame at the 1080. And so today I'm going to be talking about just making some textures for the couches as well as glass, and if I have some time I'll go over the wood as well as probably even some of the carpet materials that I put together. And then I'll go over the settings and explain the differences between how that actually correlates with your materials. And let me go ahead and open. I attached all these already. Do it again.
This is how you attach things.
Yeah, right, exactly. I had already added all these. Let me do that real quick. So this was the environment put together. So first and foremost, it's a simple scene. It's nothing too crazy. I do have some lighting set up in here, but I'll go through and explain the different types of lights and why I did it a certain way. And we'll start with going over the textures. I'm all about organization as well, so you'll see that a lot of my stuff is, I use the layer panel a lot, and everything is actually always named and correlated properly to a lot of my scenes. Basically what I'm doing. This is the full setup. First I'm going to go with is the couch. So I'm going to isolate the couch, and then we're going to start in the texture mode. Do it from camera one. All right. With RedShift, what's really neat, they have a converter here as well, and you can reset all your material editor slots through there by right-clicking and going down into RedShift Converter. What's also neat about this, if you're a primary user of V-Ray, they have a V-Ray type of conversion in here. So if you have your material set up with all your bitmaps and you hit Start Conversion, it would actually set all your material maps into the proper channels. So it's really neat to really switch over between V-Ray to RedShift. And if you need to go vice versa, there's scripts out there, like on the script spot or something, that you can actually do that as well. So first we're going to start off with one of the couch fabrics. We're going to do a new material node. I like to use a multi-sub material because that it's easier to apply to objects later on, and as well as saving out material libraries. And by doing that, it's easy to update any type of textures in your scenes. First off, I'm going to do this first one. You always name out your node. It's going to be the couch fabric. The old one, it's going to be multiple. And in the color slot, you'll notice that it's a slightly bit different, that you now have a weight. And this weight is actually almost the same similar settings under your maps, how you have it for the amount. Basically, at weight 1, it's full usage. At weight 0, it does not use anything in your color channel. So you got to be aware of that. If you're trying to edit something and all of a sudden you're like wondering why it's not showing, just check your weight, make sure it's at 1. So we're going to do a composite node. Start off with, and we're going to add 2 layers. In the first layer, we're going to do basically a RedShift bitmap. I like to stick with RedShift instead of doing the default bitmap because it has less chance to crash if it stays correlated with what RedShift's renderer is. And then we're going to add the first couch material. So we're going to go into our materials real quick. Let me pull up the location. And then we're gonna do the first material, which is our couch main diffuser 1. Where is that located? Couch main diffuser 1. So basically we're gonna be blending these two together to be able to create a different type of blend feel of fabric. So we're gonna apply the first one, and then we're gonna make that into a screen so we can blend it and make it a little bit brighter for the second one and below it. And that one, apply another bitmap, and then we're gonna make that one the diffuse 2. A great thing for fabrics, if you're a user of regular standard, you might be used to Phong type of BRDF. Very similar to that is the Shirley material. It's really widely used for creating cloths and types of fabrics. So we'll be using this one to create our fabric. What's great also about RedShift, you don't have to really, you still got to worry about samples, but don't be afraid to actually crank it up. You'll notice I'll be using large numbers for samplings. Even though you're using such large numbers, it'll still render quickly. The way that when we go through the settings, I'll explain why that is. All right. And so after we get that set up, we're gonna now then roughness, it will determine at 0. It's basically your full reflectivity, and all the way up, it will be your full blurriness. So it goes between 0 and 1. We're gonna be putting that about, let's say, I had this written down. I think it was about 0.78. You don't want it too reflective on your reflectivity, just because of you don't want it to feel like a plastic or a metal or anything. We'll keep it at the IOR, and we'll do it at IOR at 1.45. The higher IOR you get, the more metallic your material tends to be. We don't want to be having a metallic material, you want more cloth. 1.45 is basically your default for any type of material for IORs. We're not doing anything with translucency, so we're going to leave that default. And then we're going to go ahead and move on into the next part of it. This is a really good thing. Coding is a really awesome thing. It actually has it built in now. In V-Ray, you have to do like a blend material. You have to have 2 different types of codes to get like a first coat and a clear coat on top of it. Now in RedShift, it actually has it built in with inside your material node, so you're able to have your coding on top of your actual material if you need be to do that. But we're not going to be using that for this instance. So what we're going to need to do now is take the composite material, we're going to insert it into the roughness. So this basically is going to take what we did on the diffuse channel and be able to apply it in here. So you'll notice with inside this node, that you're starting to see the reflectance come back. Since we actually made it blurry, we're going to want to make sure it goes more towards that. So we're going to take the roughness down. Well, we'll start going about 0.75 because we want to be able to spread it out a little bit more. So what's going to happen when you do this, it'll take your diffuse node, and then it will take the black and whites and indifferences between your roughness of it and only put it in certain areas inside your cloth material. So you'll starting to notice that certain highlights will happen at certain areas of where you're wanting your material to show. All right. So next we're gonna actually then go to is, oh, I'm sorry, that's actually supposed to go into the color. We're gonna be doing this one with a different black and white map. I'm sorry about that. Do a bitmap, another one. And we're going to be applying the reflection color. So this one's more of a black and white map. This is the map I was talking about to diffuse, to apply over your materials. And then normally you don't have to really worry about any of these other ones yet. these are mostly for if you're doing more intricate type of materials, more like if you're doing something in subsurface or you're doing more of metallics or things like that. If you wanted more textures and more developed types of materials, we're not worrying about that today. So I'll just quickly skip over that. We're gonna go straight to our bump map. And so in the bump map, we're gonna basically be doing another node, another bitmap and apply a bump material that I already created out. So we do RS bitmap, type that out, and then we're gonna apply the bump onto it. We don't want the bump too strong, so we're gonna bring that down to about 10-ish, so it doesn't overpower the scene. Go ahead and apply that to our objects. So, main part of the cushions, this is what the materials can be applied to. So what we want to do in here is then take our polygons and go down to your ID set. So I'm going to set it to 1. So now that these are not being affected by that material solid. I already pre-UV mapped these. So you're gonna notice the textures already act perfectly to it. It's all just for timing. Normally you would do a UV unwrap to get everything, the textures and all proper to it. So I did it and I collapsed it already, just for speed. And then the last but not least, that's an ID of 1. So I already have a preset set up and some lights in here. I'm gonna go ahead and just do previses, not pre, but quick renders so we can actually view these as we're going through. These all should be ready at 1080. And so that goes like that right here. Let me cancel that real quick. Let me make sure those are all default. Those have this material as well. Back to 1. So the lightings I have currently in here are lights, I have a RedShift sun and a couple of planar lights. I'll go over those here in a bit. So with that material, you're able to start to create more of a cloth-like feel. So when you start to look at this, from the composite material, you're starting to see the colors bleed in from the 2 diffuse maps that I have. So the one that was lighter and the one underneath that is a little bit darker. So by putting that into your color channel, you're actually able to pop those colors out a little bit more. And then piled on top with your roughness, it spreads out that reflection channel over it to make it feel more like cloth. And then we're using that bump map just to give that little bit more texture to it to make it feel like it's part of the cloth material. As you can see, it's actually rendering quite quickly. Already, I have it at such high settings too as well, so I'll go over those here in a bit. So that took about a minute at 1080, which is, I think, pretty awesome compared to a lot of renders. Well, it does take a while. So you start noticing too that you don't see any types of noise happening in here, which is really nice. A lot of the times that you'll get with a lot of these settings and stuff like that, even though they can be low or some can be high, you'll start starting to see noise in a lot of these areas. And a lot of that is gone, which is really awesome. All right. Since we already did one, we can easily now be able to do the other ones. I'm gonna go ahead and save out a new version in case it crashes. That is notorious for Macs to do. So now we can easily create our new fabric. We're just gonna copy it over. We'll rename it to our second fabric, and easy as it is, since now we have everything set up, all we have to do is go through each of these node slots and just change our materials to what we need for our next one, after cascading down to all the cloths that we need. So the next one I'm gonna do real quick is gonna be the more one of the pillows. So it's gonna be fabric dark. We'll switch over to the next one. Keep it at screen. I think it was actually look fine having it at that. Since we instanced it to the other slots, we don't have to worry about changing it on that one. We just now need to go down to your bitmap under here. We're going to change it over to fabric for the reflection color, the black and white channel. And then we'll go over to the bump as well. Apply it to this one. We're going to set that ID to 2. Now, let's go to our settings here. Quick and easy way to pull up your render viewer without having to actually set up a render button. If you were to hit these buttons, defaults to max is default. You don't want to have that, so we're going to hit F10. And with inside of there, you can go to your output under your render viewer to pull it up. So we're just going to do a region render. We're going to go over to this area. Oh, no, I need to render. So again, everything transferred over well. You still have that fill fabric, but also the way the lighting is affecting on here, you're not getting that glossiness that you see like over here, clear over it. What it's doing, it's spreading it out within that roughness channel to where actually you can see it being dispersed throughout the fabric, and it doesn't look like it's just being applied on top. Go ahead and minimize that. Copy over to the next slot. Make the third one. Again, just go through. We're going to replace all the textures that we applied before. This one's going to be the blue. Again, since it's instance into the color channel, it all should be good to go. We're going to change our reflection color out here, map to this one. And then our bump map. And let's see, let's apply it to, let's do it to this one. And that, we'll do it to those two. Now, that's going to be our node 3. No, 3 as well. Return. And then we'll go ahead and bring this back up and do another region render for this area. You can start seeing how this one, how the fabric still is being affected by it, which is, I think it's happening really nice. The way it's bouncing off of here too as well to get that lighting reflection and that subtlety of that color bouncing onto that side. It's nice. gives it that good separation. And last but not least, we'll do the last cloth texture. So copy it over one more time. Rename it accordingly. Fourth one. And then go back through and replace all the things again. This one's going to be light. Down to the roughness. Change it with this one. Last but not least, the ball map. Pre-render for all of this. Oh, that did not apply. Let's go ahead and select that one. This one, apply the material. This is going to be for the fourth slot. Let's make our ID to 4. Now, bring up our render again. And you can tell the quickness and the speed of this is, I think, amazing. How fast it renders out for how not expensive this program is to have, and the speed of what it renders, I think is amazing. Compared to V-Ray, this definitely is one of the ways to go to create a lot of my materials now. It's been my go-to. I've been less and less using V-Ray, the more I've been using RedShift. And quick and easy, just a little region render at 1080, 34 seconds worth of render time, which is phenomenal. It gets me so excited when I get able to see that quality of a render at that size, being able to create these types of materials that fast, which is amazing. So as you can see, I'm going to zoom in closer here so you can start seeing the feels of it. A lot of it has to do with the material, but comping it all together, you can get that fabric feel very quick, very easily, because the way that RedShift handles its different nodes here, it's very simple and very straightforward to use. It tells you what it is, and you just apply your material there once you have it unwrapped and everything, and boom, you have it. And it looks great. I'm always excited to do this. Another thing that I really did thing to do, every time the client would go, hey, we want to have this thing fully done in glass. And I'm like, and that's gonna take forever. And I was like, I'll always try to figure out a way how to push them away from doing anything that was glass or translucent as much as I could. But now that I found out how quickly you can do it inside of RedShift, I'm a big advocate of it now. Someone mentions it, I was like, yeah, we can totally do that. Let's make glass everything. So I'm going to do it to the coffee table. So we'll bring that out. Turn that back on. To a perspective view. Simple object, just a couple of planes and stuff, but the way it renders out, it actually looks really nice. So first and foremost, I'm gonna go ahead and leave this material on that I had here before, just because it's the time's going by really fast. So I already have a sub ID set for this. I'll go ahead and kind of just forego that for the meantime. I'm going to clear this out because that's the ID that I had set for it. We're going to make a new RedShift node. So it'll be RedShift material. And glass is actually pretty easy. So all you really have to do is under your reflection and transmission. This is basically your translucency channel. You just turn your weight all the way up to 1. And it should be pretty much good to go. First, there it is. Alright, so we're going to do that. Make sure I do everything in the right steps. We're going to want some of a reflection on there as well, so we're going to make sure it's like pretty much all clear, good to go. We're going to leave it at default reflection because we want it to have the pure glass, not a blurred type of material. And we're going to change the color into more of a bluish type of glass. So I'm going to go more into the blue channel. And I want to copy that over as well into this backlit translucency. Because we're going to be using a little bit of that as well. Because what a backlit will do, it'll take the back of your material and apply a color to that as well and give it a little bit more translucency to your objects. I'm going to put that up at 1 as well. As you can already see, we have pretty nice glass material going there already. We're going to make sure, just keep it at the Beckham. This is like using a blend mode from any other type of material that's out there. That's basically a really good way to go on it. And then we keep the IOR at 1.5. It's a pretty good reflection for it. We don't have to worry about samples on here since we don't have any type of blurriness going on. So we can leave it at default 16. Go ahead and hit up a render. You can see quickly already, just with basically just the basic stuff that we did to it already, boom, you have glass already. And already right now it's flying through pretty quickly. Normally with refraction set all the way up, you would have some issues of it trying to calculate what's going on behind it. And right now it's flying through it, which is really nice. And you get a really good look at it quickly for what it is. I love it a lot. And what's really great about this, you're able to have a quick alpha channel without any type of like V-Ray. You always have to do some workarounds to finally get your alpha channel to work. And when you saved it out, sometimes it never saved it properly because then you have, in V-Ray you have to go through some sort of setting, change it to color and alpha mode to get it to work. And sometimes even that, it didn't work. At least with this, it just works, which is nice. And I love that a lot. And so as you already can tell right there, boom, it's very nice glass. And yeah, it gets me excited. I look at it and I can stare at it for a while because it just looks pretty. And we're going to add another little tidbit to it. We're going to put a rug underneath it as well, just to add to the refraction that's happening in there. And you can still see, even with that in there, the speed of what's going to be happening with it. So real quick, we're going to do another texture. I'm gonna do it within this node since it's separate. So we're gonna make a new RedShift material again. And it's gonna be very similar to what we did with the cloth and the couch. It's just done for a rug. So instead of doing like a blend type of material, I'm just doing a basic texture. I got this texture, I didn't make it myself, I just pulled it from TurboSquid, so just because of time. So we're going to do that, we're going to do another RS bitmap for RedShift bitmap. And then we're going to take our carpet material. So we're going to do our diffuse, just straight up right onto there. Let's go ahead and apply it, just so I don't forget. And that should be a node of the 5. And again, I already UV mapped it for sake of time. So from there, we're gonna do the similar process that we did before. So we're gonna go into here. Let me actually name this too. So I'm always thinking about naming things. It's easier in the long run, especially if you're in the late night. You want things to be named, and if it's not, it's always a pain going back to it and trying to figure it out. So again, we're gonna instance this over into our color channel, reflection color. We're just gonna instance it. And then basically it's gonna take on the reflection of what that cloth is. And then we're gonna do another roughness on top of that. So we do another bitmap. So we're gonna do the reflection color. There it is. So this is basically like a noise map that I use. It's nothing too crazy. It's just to give like a little disbursement of it. There's kind of big splotches here and there, so you have differences between the darks and the lights. Kind of like when you're running your hand over like a fluffier type of carpet, you'll start seeing the different types of fields. So I'll apply that on top. We're going to make sure our roughness is down. Oh, and we also want to make sure to adjust our reflection down to about 0.75, so it blurs a bit. And our samples back to really high. And from there, very good. Last but not least, we're going to do our bump map. Again, we're going to put that down to 10. 10 has been a good default. 1, you barely see anything. I've seen 10 to be like the new 1. So if you do like 10, 20, 30, 40, it's kind of like the progression through it. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on. Do another bitmap. We're going to do our normal map. Actually, it works well just in the bitmap. There is a normal map slot that you can apply to it, but RedShift is going to start getting rid of it because map just works similarly the same as it, so you can just apply it straight into that channel with your normal maps. And then it's already applied to it, and then we're going to go ahead and hit another render. So Shift Q. So as you can see in here already, it's starting to do some of the refractions that I was talking about from earlier. You can see in the edgings and stuff like that. And even with that happening in there, it's still flying by through this render. The render still goes by quickly, which I love about it. Again, I will keep saying that. I love how fast it goes. And it's really great, especially when you're in crunch timelines and you're wanting a nice quality still, but you're able to produce it faster without having to worry of it not working properly like you want. So as you can see, as the light hitting it, you can see now the nice little the cloth type feels you're getting inside of there, similar to what the couch was. So. And even from the reflections you're seeing on there, it calculated that pretty quickly going through, and then from the refraction bounce from the ground. It's looking nice, even with the shadow casting in there. It's still calculated pretty quickly. And again, pulls that alpha channel. So it's a good thing to see. So that took about a minute at 1080. Yeah, that's a basic quick run through of our materials. I feel like I can't go through any more of it. I can just quickly tell you about the metal material. Metal materials, I tend not to go fully chrome on it. Basically on this material, I'm using a more of like a grayish black I'm going through as well as adjusting I always have a hard time saying that word, but basically what that does is basically it changes your angle of your reflection to make it more warp-like metal feel into it. So you always want to do that and do a rotation on it, because once you hit a render on it, it'll give you the effect of metal, of that metalness. And what we'll do then to create more metally is bring up your IOR to 100, and that will create more of a metal-like texture quicker. And then if you wanted to take it another step level, you could go into your coat material, apply another map to it, and apply that in your material slot. And what it will do is then, if you want these like subtle differences inside of it, you can then start adjusting more of like a old type of metal feel. You can start seeing more reflective to more diffused areas, which is really nice. I didn't do it with this one, but that's something you actually can do with that. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the settings real quick within our RedShift settings. So just like any one of them, you have your default common parameters. It's the same thing throughout any type of render you do, starting from basic, default, V-Ray to any type of other one. So these are usually all the same. It starts varying differences when you start getting more into your different tabs. And so from the top, this is where you can pull up your render viewer. It's really quick and easy. Again, you can't pull it from up here. This will pull up your defaults. And then if you try to render from that, it'll just close it out and pull this up anyways. But to avoid that extra step, you can just go in here and hit show render view and it'll pull right up. This will deal with your IPR. I didn't use IPR today because it's still buggy. It still crashes. But to use your IPR, you just hit the play button here and let that sit. It'll go through and it'll use your progressive renderer that you have your settings here for. So basically, this is kind of like your different types of passes it'll do. What's great about it, if you're doing texturing, you can actually then live move around in within your IPR. So if you're in your perspective view, you just rotate around and it should a little live update over here so you can actually easily and quickly view your materials. All with live updates. You have to be careful with it too, because what happens if you have autosave on and it's really quick, well, it tends to crash your IPR. It's not ideal. It happens the same with V-Ray. If you have it on autosaves, it'll crash. Before you save, you want to make sure you turn it off and then save your project, then you can turn it back on. If not, it will crash. But I found that happens between a lot of programs as well. So, IPR is really cool to me. All right, then unified samples. This is where you go through and you can start figuring out within your scene how to alleviate some of your noise. This is one of the basic parts you can do with it. So you got your min samples and you got your max samples. So basically your minimum samples is the minimum type of samples within your renderer that your renderer sees that it will start actually starting at. I started at a higher number, so it'll start seeing more of that noise and start at 64 instead of starting like at 16. Because once you see it at a certain level, it'll only use about that much. I like to start at high and in high. So it usually uses between 64 to about 512. If you want an even higher, cleaner type of density, you'll then go to your threshold. 0.01 is a great default, but if you want that production quality level, I recommend doing 0.00 or 0.003. Because that'll get your production quality level of it, and it'll give it a nice, cleaner look. It'll alleviate a lot of that noise happening within your scene. They're about to get rid of a lot of these stuff, so I'm not going to talk about these. That's another one of their updates. So the sample filtering, starting from the top to bottom, the top is the blurriest. So basically your edges, your textures, anything in your scene. Box is not the best way to go. If you're doing something cheap and quick, I recommend it. Still image real quick, you can get it out. But as you go up to land coast is the crisper type of edging you can get on your model. You get a better look on your texture, you get better edging. I like to use Mitchell. Mitchell is a great default between the two. A lot of people like to use Goss. Mitchell to me is one of the great defaults to start with. And these are default 2 and 2 and 4. This is basically just your sizes within your renderer to when you actually default, it's fine. I tend not to mess with those. We're then doing nothing with AOV processing, so I do tend not to use that. Motion blur wise, I do stuff in post for this. I use RSMB. Basically, it's a great motion additive to do in post wise. I really don't see a need to do it in here unless you're doing something really intricate. They do have a denoise function. This is not the end-all be-all to your noise. It does add render time and it does get rid of noise. But if you have a scene that has low settings and samples and you try to use that to get rid of it, you're going to have some weird artifacting going on. You're going to have big blotchy types of messes with inside your render. I don't tend to recommend that at the beginning. That's something I would use like later on after you start getting used to it. You understand the settings a little bit more. Then you can start using the denoise function in there. It adds about 2 to 3 minutes to your render, so do keep that in mind. They have the different types of passes. Great default one is the single pass. It's the quickest and it does one of the best. The OPEX one takes the longest, and it also, what it does, it doesn't read noise very well. And what it'll do, it'll start eating away in your materials and start taking these and making them flat. So be very careful of using that engine. If you want to go that route, you totally could. But there is a lot of stuff you can do in post to actually get rid of noise as well. I like to use a denoiser that's from Red Giant, and it works really well. Don't worry about any of this stuff. This stuff is usually the way it is. These are all default. I don't mess with that. GI. GI is one of the biggest things that help produce great quality renders. Brute force is great for a primary engine. I wouldn't recommend any type of other engine for your primaries. Primary brute force just works. If you want to make sure your noise is going away, just raise up your number of rays. 512 is a good default, but if you want more, just keep raising it. It just always works. Brute force is great, but the only downside of it is really slow. But using that as your primary is one of the best ways, because when you use the secondary, I like to use the radiant point cloud, or a lot of people also like to use the, it looks like they removed it, never mind. There was a point cache that used to be in there as well. I like to use point cloud because the bounce between the two works really well, but I'll explain that here in a second. So the next one they have here is the photon map. I only recommend photon mapping if you're doing a lot of stuff that's dealt with, more of like glass to do type of reflection bounces. When you're doing like waters and liquids and things like that. Photon mapping is usually best for that type of thing. Any other reason, it doesn't need to be used. And then irradiance cache. Irradiance cache is great for calculating slow-moving scenes over time. This is why I like to use. I don't tend to use it for this one, just because it calculates in areas that it doesn't need to. So basically, with inside your scene, like behind your camera, is why it takes a little longer to render, because it's calculating the bounces that's happening that's not even on scene at all. It's not even being affected. So that's why I stick with using brute force and irradiance point cloud, because point cloud only shows what's going on in your camera. And what it does, it carries on from frame to frame from each of your scenes and uses that to calculate your number of bounces that are happening in your scene. So between brute force and using the point cloud cache, it's one of the best and quickest ways to get a render. But if you want something that's really clean and quick and you're not worried about time, you can do brute force and brute force, crank up the number of rays, and you're good to go. But it will take longer. Not recommended, but if you want to do it that way. This one, for some reason, I don't know why, this is automatically checked off. If it's checked off and you hit your render button and it crashes and continually crashes every time you render, it's because your GPU is not being optimized properly with inside of your render. Just turn that on and it's great to have because it works well. Because what it'll do is it'll start utilizing your percentage-wise. It'll use 70% for your renderer, and it'll keep like a 5 to 10% for your computer as well, so it doesn't crash your programs or crash your computer. So I usually tend to keep it with that just checked on. And then render elements. I use a lot of render elements. And this is where I'm going to get into how to bring this all over into After Effects. So I'm going to do another quick render real quick. While that's happening, I'll explain the different types of render elements that we use, as well as how to then start to bring that over. So I'm going to do about a rough view like this real quick. Let's put that away. Right there. Just bring this back up. So I'm going to render that really fast. Should remember to render. 1 sec. So render elements is great to use, especially if you're using EXRs. We primarily use EXRs in-house just because it's easier to then calculate all your data. A lot of people like to use PNG sequences. PNG sequences take a lot of space and they're very hard to keep track of over time. EXRs are great, so think of it as a grouped layer all put into one, into a frame sequence. So each frame will have your diffuse, your GI, your refractions, your shadows, your specular, and then this custom channel that I have on here is actually my Andy inclusion. And then it'll store all that per frame in your data file, all within one sequence. And then what's really cool about that is then you can bring it over to After Effects and you can split those apart, and then you have all your passes. It's quick and easy. The files can be large, but it's easier to keep track of. So now that we got this saved out, we already have we got the single file frame. Another thing you have to make sure in order to add those, you can't just add it to your render elements. Once you do that, you have to make sure in your setup that you apply them to your EXR, or else you'll never see them. So what you'll do is then you hit the add, you'll see all your render elements here, make sure to add those, hit OK, then it'll all be here. If you don't want it, just easily select it, delete it, and if you feel like you need it back again, go back to add and be back in this list. You select it, hit OK. So just if you don't, really quick, you just delete them all, add, they're all there again. Just select them all, hit OK, and then they're all back on. Just hit save. So now all your render elements are applied to it. So when we rendered it out, if you're doing a still frame, basically all you have to do is save as a multi-layer EXR. If you save image as, it won't save it. If you're doing straight up image, you can either just do it straight through your comment to file location, or if you render it and you figure out to do that, you can just go file, save as a multi-EXR, and then pick the location that you want to save it at. In this instance, we're going to save it to our composite graphics real quick. I'm going to name this as Ubuntu. And give it a sec, because it has to calculate what it's trying to do. It saves your frame, then it's saving all your passes within one. So just give it a little bit, and do its little thing. Yeah, and it should all be there. As you can see, here's all the passes too as well that I rendered out. We'll go ahead and bring up After Effects. Yeah, it's really neat because you have it all here ready. So you got your diffuse, GI, reflections, all that stuff that you need for it. Refractions, specular lighting, and then my custom is the occlusion. There's a way to set it up without doing the render elements, but I prefer doing it through here just because it's quick and easy to get to, and you don't have to worry about doing a separate pass altogether. Let me go back to standard. So quick. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in that render that we did. After 2, we import it. So easily, actually it's not too, forgot. Bring it into a new one. I'm going to make this thing a 16. We don't want to make sure we get the best channel so we don't get any type of banding or any type of stuff happening. So since it has a lot of types of shadowing happening in there, we got to make sure to do that. So make 16-bit. Alright, so what's really neat about this, you can do one or two ways. One way takes a little longer. You can go to your effects. They have a default extractor in here. So if you type in there, you can actually have your extractor, bring it onto your object. All you do is select into your channel layer, and then boom, here's all your layers that you need to do. You can go to your custom one, now you have your occlusion. You dupe it out, and here, you can do now your GI, so on and so forth. Another way you can do it, it's a free plugin that you can get. It's called ProEXR. Oops, I'm gonna do that. ProEXR. All you have to do then is let's go ahead and delete that effect. You select the layer, go to File, and it'll pop up in right here. So all you have to do is click it, and boom, here's all your layers. And you don't have to worry about doing it one by one, going through all those. It's kind of tedious. Only downside is it makes a lot of pre-comps. If you're not a fan of it, it's gonna happen, but at least you have it all saved out. So you got your source at the top, that's your main one, and then down from there you got your specular, your shadow, and all that. And then from there you can start doing all your blend modes and everything that you need for it. Excuse me. Another great thing what it does too, it actually puts it all into proper order and how it should be layered out inside of your scene. Starting from the diffuse in the bottom, your GI, how your refractions and reflections should affect it, shadows on top of that, with your specular lighting on top. It puts it in proper order and how you should rearrange everything. And then all you do from there is if you wanted to do it, you can start adding and removing little bits and pieces of it as you see fit. So if you wanted, you can add a screen to it, and you could, from there, if you as well, you can do another color correction, probably curves on it, and if you want to crunch in some of the whites on there to really hit in certain areas, you can do that. So you start, like I only want it to be in those areas for some reason, you can do that. That's what's great about doing a lot of these render passes. You can start adding and removing as you need for your renderers. Do I still have enough time to go over lights?
Yeah,
Yeah.
15 minutes.
How much?
15.
15? Alright. I didn't know if I would have enough time, that's why I didn't go over. So really quick, I do have lights already set up here. I like to start everything off with a dome light. It is a great default to have, especially if you want to use HDRIs into your scenes to afford like a nice lighting for like an area. So basically default for it in the settings, basically the samples you want to match to your scene. So 2024 is usually what I start off with, and then from there, really don't have to worry about anything else. Once you apply that onto there, you can just go through and put your bitmap on here for your HDRI. It's pretty much good as a default. So my HDRI is somewhere in here. I already have it applied. Here it is. This is one that we developed over time, and I find it as a great default to do like studio type lighting and within your scene. So if we were to do that by itself, let me go ahead and like turn all these off. Just really quick, zoom into here. Already with that, with the cars, not car studio, but the like a lighting studio setup, it gives you this is something that we developed, and this is what we use in house a lot for our default stuff, and then we build off of there. But it creates great lighting and reflections and everywhere inside your objects. So I always like to start off with that as a default before I start going into actually lighting with actual lights in your scene. And using that creates an even faster render because you don't have less light shadow happening, less light casts, and it makes for a quicker render. That's something you can definitely do if you wanted something to go really fast. You don't care about having any of the lights. Just do that. Boom, you're in, you're out. It's good. It's done. And then within the lights, they have different types. So you got your area, point, spot, and directional. These are very similar to the default Maxes, to where they have the area, the point light, the spotlight, and the directional light. V-Ray has it named a little bit differently because they have like a spherical planar, and they have a dome, then they have like a object type of material. That's one thing I do miss between V-Ray and RedShift is that I can take objects and then actually convert them into lights. Because before, I could actually say if I wanted this couch to be a light, and in V-Ray I could go through and change it to object emitter and select this object and it'll literally emit from the couch as a light source. I do miss that within RedShift. It does not have it. The only way that you can really do that is through your materials by using a RedShift incandescent type of material. It's kind of like basically a white light source illumination that you can apply to your objects. Sometimes I don't recommend doing it this way because you can't adjust any types of the samples or any types of the type of emission lighting effects that you get from it. So give or take when you use that kind of thing. A lot of the lights I like to use is this basically the point lights like this. Those the bracer planar lights. And then I would use these more for like a spherical if I wanted more of an area within certain areas. You can use those for lamps. You can use those great for highlights for objects. You can animate them along an object to create nice hot spots going along to it. So that would be your point light. And then you have your spotlight, almost very similar to your spot that you have in default max. And then you are able to turn on the target for it as well. You can turn it on and off as you please. If you don't want it, you just select your light, turn it off, and you're good to go. And same for the directional. It's more of an area light, so it does use your cone area. It's not like a full area light where it's almost like a dome. So wherever that cone is directed, kind of like within your standard lights, it's going to be only affecting those areas. So do keep that in mind when you're doing that. And again, that can be targeted as well. You can easily switch over and then select your target and then move as you please, and then go back to your light and then move your light. So, and everything in here in the settings are pretty much the same. If you're used to using Max or any type of other 3D rendering program or any type of lighting, the settings have not changed. So you have your exposure, you can put color maps to it, you can change your color modes to different temperatures. Everything is pretty much very similar to if you've used V-Ray, if you use Metal Ray, if you used regular standard Max. So that's basically all I have today. I was really excited to show you what I actually have learned in with RedShift here in Max. It's been very fun to actually learn it and then be able to show other people how to use it as well. And I hope you've learned some stuff from this today. And if it's something that you really want to know more about, again, I had my email up earlier. I can pull it up here again. You can message me, ask questions and things like that. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A here in a sec. If you have questions now, I can just answer them. So if anyone has any questions. Yes, no, what?
What kind of video cards are you using to render?
Ah, yes. The video cards I have in my machine, I'm using the NVIDIA's RTX's, their GeForce, the 2080 Ti. So I'm SLI them together. So if you're going to use RedShift, it's primarily you're going to want to have a GPU type of card. If you don't, you can't use RedShift. RedShift is a GPU based render. So if you really want to do it, make sure your machine has it. You have another one.
So you showed glass. We do a lot of clear plastic. How do you do a clear plastic rather than glass? Because there's a little bit more noise, a little bit more blurriness.
Yeah, so if you're gonna do a more of a clear plastic, you're gonna not want the full type of reflection that's going on, refraction that's going on there, and you're also gonna want to make sure to add in more of your roughness on here. There is a separation between the two, so there is a button you can link your reflection to your refraction from here, or you can have it individually. So if you're gonna be doing like a clear plastic type of thing, you're gonna want to have those separate because they are affected differently compared to being glass. So I always like to do that separately. You can bring up the roughness to make sure it blurs your material a little bit more. 0 is always the clearest. The higher you go, the blurrier it gets. And you want to make sure you sample it up higher. This is a great way to start making like frosted type glasses. Or if you want more plastic, you want to bring your refraction down. Not too much, but you can start getting more of a translucent feel type of a plastic. So where you get more like, say, like a milk jug or some like an orange juice bottle. You can make it milky as well by doing your transmittance and changing your transmittance color. So basically what that will do is when your light hits it, it will affect your plastic in a way to where you start getting a secondary color within inside of your material. So if you needed it to be like, say if it was an orange juice and the bottle was white, we need some of that orange from the inside to get onto your plastic, so you use your transmittance. And you'll be able to get that effect happening inside there. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
She has one.
okay, go ahead.
Is lighting and rendering your favorite part of 3D process?
It's mostly compositing. I love compositing. Lighting was at the beginning. I enjoyed doing it when I first initially got into doing 3D. It I would like in everyday life, I'll be sitting there and just staring at like a light bulb or how way light reflects off of something and figure out how would I mimic that in 3D. And I would do that pretty much every day, that and texturing. And I always applied everyday life into how would I do that in 3D. And ever since doing that, I did with everything else. I'm like, how would I comp that to make that same effect with inside After Effects or within Nuke, and to create these types of environments. But lighting, I do enjoy, but I do enjoy doing comping. Anything else?
How do you decide on the balance? There's a lot of stuff that you can do like in render pretty close versus things you can do post the noise and you're adding motion blur.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like handle the trade-offs between like figuring out which type to use?
It depends on what I'm actually doing. If I'm doing more of an object-based, it's a single object, nothing to do with interiors and environments, I'll do all that stuff in 3D because I can do a 4K render with like 1 minute. And so why not do it in 3D if I alleviate a lot of the post type of headaches? But if it's more of an interior and it's taking about 20 to 30 minutes a frame, that's when I'm like, don't bother with that inside of 3D. It's gonna take much longer. You got more of a headache trying to get the whole processing down, and then you got the issue of what if it starts flickering? I don't want that to flicker just because I applied that noise in there. And there's a lot of what if scenarios. So that's the type of thing I'll just, let me take that into After Effects, I'll apply it in the denoise in there, and I'll do all this stuff in post, just because it alleviates a lot of that headache in the long run. Get one.
So I noticed that for the elements, you didn't put occlusion in there, you made it custom.
Oh yes, I briefly ran by that. So occlusion in V-Ray, you would do occlusion using a light material and a dirt material mixed together to create your occlusion. There isn't a similar effect to do that in here. The only way I've come across it currently is to do it through your render elements. And so basically in your render elements, you create a custom tab. I would not use their ambient occlusion one. It does not work the way you would think it would work. You apply it on there and then all of a sudden it turns all black. And then you try to adjust it, then it's all white. And you try to adjust it, then it disappears. So I don't do it through there. So I do it through the custom tab. This is the old way of doing it apparently in RedShift that I found out. So in here you'll find out RS custom base node, if I can find it. And in here, your default shader map, you want to then type in RSAO for your RedShift ambient occlusion. And then from there, you can actually apply that map. And to be able to adjust that, just instance it over to your material slot, and then boom, you have occlusion stuff you can do. So you can add your samples in there, and your spread, your amount, your distance, your fall off, and all that you normally do with occlusion. So then when you render it, as you saw from that last render that I did, it's still here. It'll then create your occlusion render from that. And that's been the quickest way I have figured out how to do an occlusion without having to create a lot of headache. And just default with the spread at 8, fall off 1, to bring up the samples, this is what it turns out to. And it works really well. And normally with a lot of occlusions, you have to do a balance between what your scene units are, because sometimes if you're in inches or in centimeters, you have to adjust these numbers accordingly to that. And it can be a little bit of a push and pull to figure that out. But with RedShift, you just apply it, put your samples up, 0.08, you don't have to change it, hit render, and you got a pretty decent ambient occlusion. You got great whites, you got good grays, you got good darks inside of everything, and it renders pretty clean and fast. Let's say if you just want to render occlusion alone, the best way to do it, I would say you can go through your sample overrides. So these are basically like your material overrides for your whole scene. If you wanted to, you can material override your whole scene out with just a black light, so it renders a snap, and then your occlusion will render like in 20 seconds, because it uses it as a pre-post filter and not actually as a render. So, and it renders quickly. if you want to render it separately. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Say if two objects in the scene were grouped together and they were on the same, I guess, UV map, and you want one object to be translucent and the other one not. How would RedShift handle that in rendering?
In rendering?
Yeah.
So you're saying like one object is translucent and it's just plain material and they're intersecting each other.
Well, they're not necessarily intersecting on the same. If they're grouped together in the same unwrap, I guess.
I think I know what you mean. I'm still a little confused about that one. So basically, let's say they're grouped together. So they're in a group like this, correct? And then you're trying to apply material to that. Is that where you're getting at? That's normally something I would do with a multi-sub. Because you can still, even though if you have it in the same UV map, and you can copy over your material into another one or instances into that. You can apply that into there, and then you can go to your group, open it, and you can apply your IDs between the different ones between that multi-sub. So then you can have it still as a group or UV together with that same UV map, but with that one material node. And this is why I love multi-subs, and because you can do a lot with them. But do keep in mind, the farther number you go, the more it lags. So I don't recommend going past 20, because then all of a sudden it doesn't want to open. Anything else? Yes.
Not render related, but since you know you own your own business, what advice would you give to artists, like how to handle themselves professionally?
I'm not great professionally. I am more behind the scenes, but you have to be able to separate from your project, your own ego, and as well as your just your mindset on like, oh, if someone tells you it doesn't look good, it's not an attack against you. It's just that's the way they feel with the work. You have to be able to have that composure to actually look at them and say, okay, what are the issues that you had with it, so we can work together to figure this out. You gotta make sure you talk through the processes of why they see it that way, and then how you can solve that issue. That's all I can really get at the moment. Anything else? I'm seeing. Yes.
So in V-Ray, I've had the issue of trying to find the right samples.
Yes.
And then raising my samples, my render time got a lot higher. And I'm noticing that you're using samples of 1,000, 2,000. Where do you start, where do you end? Well, how does that affect your render time?
Yeah, V-Ray was very interesting in the way it worked. I took a lot of classes in V-Ray trying to figure out how it actually works, and I had been using it for years. And then all of a sudden, when I took these classes, I found out that I was using V-Ray wrong. The way actually its samples had to correlate and the balance between your materials and your render settings and everything had to be like this perfect, intricate dance. That it had to be correlated properly in order to render quickly. RedShift, you don't have to actually think of it that way. You look at a number and you see that, well, that number goes higher, it goes higher. It's going to work that way. Because in V-Ray, it's like, oh, if you go to 0.12, and then if you move this other number that's supposed to be like 15, that's going to make that one render a lot quicker. But if you made it like 30 and this one, it was weird on numbers. It just didn't work the way you thought it would work. It was very opposite. But RedShift you look at your min samples here, and min samples basically tell you that's the minimum samples it'll start at. It'll start at 64. So 64 is, think of it like, and the way it's like taking your like bits, how much it's like pushing together, and then your highest is going to be 512, and it'll calculate between those two. And so that balances ish with your samples on your texture. This is where I'm still trying to figure it out, because I saw the mindset of V-Ray. But the more I raise that number, the render times are not going up, but my material is getting cleaner. So I've been seeing that every time I keep raising that number another couple hundred or 200, my render time stays the same, but my image is getting more crisp. So that's the way I can only answer it at the moment, because I'm still new to this. I'm still figuring it out, but that's where I'm at the moment. Is trying to research that. Did I answer it? Yeah. Cool. Anything else? Yes.
You talk about, I've been out of the game for a bit, but can you talk about like GPU rendering versus CPU rendering?
Yes. So GPUs uses a lot of your VRAM on your cards. So the more GPU you have on there, it actually will take those processing all together and only render off your card, and alleviating a lot of the strenuous that your CPU has on your motherboard between multiple programs. Cards nowadays have a lot of GPUs in it. So recently, in the past couple of years, they've been like, why not use those into your renders to make faster types of renders? Because the numbers correlation between CPUs and GPUs are just phenomenally different. And CPU based, it takes your processing power, but it only limits it to a certain amount of cores that it has inside of it. And in order to upgrade that, it was very expensive. And it was also expensive to actually then be able to purchase more of those cores to render locally. So between the two, that's why I'm happy they're going GPU based, because then you can actually be able to, more of a common person, to be able to buy cards at a cheaper level, higher GPUs, to create more of like a local GPU farm basically, and for a faster renderer to do like distribution. I don't know if that really answered your question, but that was the closest I can get to it. Cool. Anything else? Are you good? Yeah. Well, that's everything I have for today. I hope you were informed and enjoyed what I had to actually talk about. And I appreciate y'all coming out. So thank you very much.
Sir, I forgot to ask one more question.
Yes.
Will this recording be posted on a private website link, just in case if we are fortunate enough to get the RedShift rendering program?
She is be able to answer that one actually.
It will be on our LinkedIn, our Facebook, our YouTube, our Vimeo, anywhere you can find us, there will be a link to it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Is there like a sheet where I can put my email so you can forward that link when the video is ready to be seen?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely can.
Yes.
So my plan is to do more of these too. So
Yes.
this is my very first one to do. So I'm very new to trying to do this. So if I stumbled, I'm sorry. But we were trying to plan to do more of these like in the coming months as well. So
Yeah.
definitely let other people know. So because we're trying to build another community around here around 3D, because
Yeah.
the 3D community kind of just disappeared several years ago.
Oh yeah.
And we're trying to bring it back. That's one of the things that we're passionate about, is the work that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And I love showing people the new stuff that comes out, things that I learned,
Mm-hmm.
not just in 3D, but also in After Effects, Premiere, anything like that. So
I'm definitely your guy. You want to go ahead and invite me over to learn something new. Because
Yeah.
I always work with 3ds Max. Maya, I'm just praying. I hope there's something new they can teach on Maya. I always need a good refresher. So.
yeah, Cinema 4D is another thing we're getting into as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of that. I don't know if you saw the video that we had in the beginning. A lot of that stuff was done in Cinema 4D.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so and X particles as well.
If,
So.
if they're, like I said, if you have like a paper or a link, or
Yeah.
just send me an email, I'd be eternally be grateful.
Yeah,
Honestly.
definitely.
I'm like a learning sponge.
That's awesome. I love teaching. So
Oh,
and
yeah.
everything that I learned, I always want to show someone. Ryan, that was here earlier, I believe he left already. Every time I get someone in, I'm like, hey Ryan, come over here. I want to show you something. I always love teaching, especially if someone really wants to learn it. It gets me even more excited to actually show them new things. So that's really cool. Yeah.
Speaking of just the general community, any plans on future of this, to put Iron Myers approach? Maybe.
Ooh, And so I don't know much of ZBrush or Maya, but what we want to do is find people that do know it and bring them in here as like guest hosts to show those things as well. Because I do have my limits on what I know, but definitely if there's people out there that want to know these certain things, we'll go find these people to bring in here and be able to show those off as well, those types of skills.
I know I can talk to a couple of professors and see if they
Yeah.
have their networks to kind of go and recommend if you feel it's fit to teach the ZBrush or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
For example, our next class is going to be motion graphics,
Yes.
so more on the 2D side and
Oh, yeah.
effects.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big need of it in Houston, and not a lot of people to fill their shoes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I have an animation degree background, and it's just like I already did freelance. I have a print job, but still, I don't care as like a 3D junkie, learning something new.
Yeah.
That's my passion.
That's great.
I don't care.
So hopefully you learned something from this one. RedShift is, and again, it's new to me. I've been figuring it out, and this is what I've learned so far on it.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning new things. Just earlier today, I figured out how to make my renders even faster. So I haven't even actually show it off yet because I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
But I taken a 4K rendering at 5 minutes down to a minute.
Oh,
So-
yeah, of course.
And it still looks great, and actually kind of looks better in a way too.
Would have a headache trying to use V-Ray back then 10 years ago, and I'm like, seriously, this shouldn't have to take that long.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. And I took I went from doing V-Ray from intermediate to master's classes, and I did classes on that for a year's worth of it. And that's when I learned that I was like, I'm doing V-Ray all wrong, and I've learned how to take renders taking for interior environments for almost an hour down to like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
To do interior type of renders because I took these classes and I figured out, dang, I didn't know what I was doing in it type of thing. Then I figured that out and I was able to then add more and make it better. But then I found this and I was like, okay, this is even better.
Okay. Yeah.
But cool.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as when this session is over, I'm definitely gonna go to you and then find what's the name of the YouTube link or the Facebook link that I can go search in and just catch up on these sessions because it'll really be beneficial for me and two other of my peers that are just trying to catch up because I'll be honest with you, I mean, no matter how skilled or how experienced or how many mistakes you make, there's always something new.
Yes.
And there's always going to be someone who's always better than you. But you got to take it with a grain of salt that this is a learning experience. This is not a competition to break somebody down or try to shame someone
Exactly.
because of their inadequate ability of their attributes.
Yeah, that's why I'm always if someone wants to learn it, I'm going to show them it.
Yeah.
Because if they want to progress in the field, I want them to succeed in that.
Exactly.
No.
And once I get skilled, I might be able to get another shot going into an interview using 3ds Max or Maya.
Exactly. So, but cool. I'm excited you liked it. What I had to show today. Awesome.
Easier than V-Ray.
Yes.
I'm sorry to
Way easier than V-Ray.
You have to do the photometrics, the particles.
It literally was an intricate balance between it all. It was because you had to figure out how your samples were correlating with each other. Because if you did like within your min and max samples, if you did a 1 in 30, you would think it would take long to render, but it actually would render faster with a lot of noise in it. But if you did like a 2 and 5, it would take forever to render. And so it was the balance between those numbers and then your texture samples and the types of textures you use and then how much you correlated your memory to that. It was a mess, but I knew how to work it. Anyway, but cool. Well, thank you for coming out.